Okay, let's get underway. Thank you for joining us today for our online seminar, Writing Your Own Functions in EasyLanguage. My name is Stanley Dash, and I'm Director of Client Training and Development in TradeStation's Client Education Department. Before we get into the material, let me familiarize you with a couple of the tools in the online seminar player that may be handy. First of all, we did straighten out a little technical glitch right before we got underway. That's where you were treated to with that audio. If you can hear me but don't see the video, and right now what I have up is a chart of the mini Dow futures. So if you don't see that, if your player is blank, the quickest way to reset the player is just to use the F5 key from the keyboard to refresh it. If for some reason that doesn't work, you may need to close the player and use the link that you received by email to re-log in. Also in the player in the upper right, you'll notice a question mark button and a link to some frequently asked questions. So if you are having trouble with some of the audio or video, check those FAQs. It may help out. And at the bottom of the player, you'll notice some text boxes, name, email address, and a place to type in a question. As questions come in during the presentation, I will try and answer them. Those that I don't get to, I'll try and follow up with an answer in the next 48 hours or so. If you can't see that question section at the bottom, you may just need to make the player window bigger in order to see the full player. The full player would be the TradeStation desktop, as well as a bar at the top that has the FAQ link in the right and the Submit Question bar at the bottom of the player. As with all our online seminars, this one will be archived and posted to our website. Due to some scheduling issues, we probably won't get this posted till the early part of next week. So give us 4 or 5 business days, and we'll make sure that this seminar is posted, as are all our others. So today's topic is writing your own functions in EasyLanguage. The first thing I'd like to do is straighten out some terminology, and let's make sure we all understand what a function is as we use that word in TradeStation and EasyLanguage, and a couple of the tools that are in TradeStation that will help us work with functions a little bit more easily. This is actually the EasyLanguage for an indicator. It happens to be the relative strength indicator, RSI, relative strength index indicator. And I opened this up for a reason, but for a moment I just want to point out some of the syntax coloring. You'll see that a number of words come up in blue. Those you know are reserved words. Those reserved words have a specific meaning in EasyLanguage, and we generally use them as predefined. Whether it's the word close or high or low for bar price points, or even some of the color words like cyan and red. You'll also notice that some words, and only one in this case, come up in a magenta color. In this case, RSI. Anything coming up in that color is a function. Now, we often use the word function, and we also use the word user function. So let me draw a distinction. When we see something in blue, it's a reserved word. It may very well have a formula, i.e. a function built in behind it. But a reserved word cannot be opened by the user. You can't open the programming code for the reserved word close. However, the functions we're talking about, again, functions and often referred to as user functions, are written in EasyLanguage and can be opened up and read by the user. In fact, when we look at the dictionary, I'll click on the toolbar button for the dictionary. Let me drag it back down into the player area. When we look into the dictionary, you'll see there is a category, user functions. And as far as we're concerned as users, those are functions. That means they do perform some calculation. We'll get into more detail in a minute. They do perform some calculation or return some information or maybe even several pieces of information. And they are actually openable. They are visible. They are exposed to the user. So anything that's in this category of user functions, again, the category is user functions, but more commonly you'll hear us call it just functions. Any of these can be opened, can be read by the user, can be copied, can be modified. Any functions that you create strictly from scratch will go into this category user function. So this category is a catch-all for any function that we supply that's openable. You know that because the syntax coloring is going to come up in magenta. And also any function that you create, which of course is openable, it's something you created. Any function that you can open will go in this category also. So all functions in that definition, according to that definition, some formula or construct that you save and can reopen, will be in this category user function. Now keep in mind that a function, we'll define a function as a commonly used formula. It's some formula that you may want to use again and again, and instead of rewriting the formula in each indicator or show me or paint bar or strategy, you choose instead to write it as a function. That way the formula is stored away. It can be opened, remember, but that way it's stored away. And you can retrieve that function just by using a few words instead of having to repeat all the calculations or all the formulas. Now the reason I opened the RSI indicator, the relative strength index indicator, is to try and hammer home that point about calling a function. This is the supplied indicator for RSI. You'll see there are a series of inputs. One variable called myRSI. And then the RSI function is actually called and then assigned to the variable. What I want to get across in here, further down, by the way, is color and alert criteria. So further down is nothing that's a technical analysis calculation, just the alerts and coloring settings. Nowhere in here do you see the formula for relative strength index. Instead, what the indicator does is call the RSI function. It calls this RSI function. You never see it. Again, it is available. It's exposed. It can be seen. We'll do that in just a minute. But you're calling the function into your work. This way, the RSI formula would not have to be repeated again and again if you want to use RSI in this case, an indicator or a show me, or you might write a custom strategy and you wanted to use the same calculation. You don't have to recreate the calculation. You just call the function. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that a function, I said that all the functions can be open. They're all exposed to the user. So you can use the open icon on the EasyLanguage section of the shortcut bar, and you can look at the list of functions, and any of these can be opened. You'll notice we have the little graphic next to the function that indicates that it's a function, and most of you know that we put a little graphic for an indicator or a strategy just so you can see the little sign or marker there so you know what type of EasyLanguage it is. You'll notice some of those function markers are red and some are green. They can all be open. They're exposed. But the ones that are in red are read-only. We create many functions as read-only, so that way you don't edit those functions as they exist. Because once the function is edited, then all the places where it's called would change, would use that new calculation. However, you can open any of these, and you can make a copy of it and create your own version. So if you wanted to work on a different version of one of these, open it up, copy and paste, work with it with a different name. But that way, any of the supplied EasyLanguage functions and the indicator, show me's, paint bar, strategies that use those functions would not change. You would write your own version. Any of the ones you write will have the green notation next to them. indicating that they can be opened, and not just opened, but they can be edited. They're not read-only. The red is read-only. Now, in addition to opening a document right from here, opening a function or any other piece of EasyLanguage right from the Open EasyLanguage dialog box, we generated that from this icon. Once you've called a function, if you right-click on the function in your analysis technique or in your strategy, there's an open the function command on the shortcut menu. And if we do that, now we're opening the function RSI. This is where the actual calculation for the relative strength index occurs. Now you'll see calling that function just using the name RSI is a lot easier than having to repeat this formula again and again and again every time you'd like to use something common like RSI. One other point to be made, you'll see that the name here, RSI, calls the function, and then there are two parameters, price and length. Those parameters are determined when the function is created. When we create the function, we determine what parameters or inputs will be required to satisfy that function or to be supplied by the user to that function. Okay, let me give you a couple other pieces of information, and then let's do a little bit of writing. The first thing I want you to think about, sort of as the background thought here, is that what you should be considering is what types of calculations do I use again and again and again that would be useful for me to create and save as functions. If you have some unique way of looking at a certain price or volume calculation, any calculation for that matter, and you like to create it in indicators, and you like to maybe put it in a show me and experiment with it in a strategy, it could be very useful to take that and save it as a function. So that's what you should be thinking. Can I save myself some work by creating these functions and then just calling them into my EasyLanguage documents without having to recreate all the formulas? Okay, a few points about functions. Functions can be numeric, true, false, or string. Here's what we mean by that. When we create a function, we can determine that that function will return to us the result of some numeric calculation, a numeric function. We can determine that that function will return to us a true or false, a logical or a Boolean function. Or the function will return to us some text, a string, some letters, characters, some written information. When we create the function, we'll determine what the return is, numeric, true, false, or string. And the other point I want to make about functions before we start to write is that the name of the function, two important things about the name of the function. It has to be one word, no spaces. You can use an underscore, and you can use a $sign. So if that helps you organize them and read them and find them in the list a little better, you can use an underscore, you can use a $sign. You can't use any of the other punctuation marks, and it does have to be one word. Now remember that the name you give the function is exactly how it will be called. So if you get very wordy with the name, it's just more typing when you're trying to call it. So you want to give it a name that'll mean something to you, but something that'll be easy to remember for you to call into your work. Okay, let's go through the process of writing. We'll do work with some numeric and text, and then I have a couple of true-false functions that I created ahead of time that I'll show you. So we'll click on the new function icon from the EasyLanguage section of the shortcut bar. We'll give this a name. Remember our rules. The rules are that it can use a $sign or an underscore, must be one word, no other punctuation. So I'm going to call this $RB. For those of you who've been through the boot camp class or the home study course, you might recognize RB as my shorthand for real body. We do a number of work in those classes with the calculation of the real body of a candlestick, the difference between the close and the open. So instead of having to write the formula, albeit small, close minus open again and again, we'll create a function that we can call into all our work. The name of it will be $RB. We could type a short description if that's helpful. We won't now. And I do want to show you the return type dropdown. There are 5 listed in here, but 3 broad categories. The first is Boolean or true-false. The next 3 are numeric. In general, if you know something is going to return an integer, for instance, it's always going to return the number of bars ago something happened, you might want to select integer numeric. But if it's going to calculate anything else with decimal places, you might just want to leave it on double. And then the 5th one says string or text. So we'll leave this set on double. This is numeric. And we'll click OK. And then we'll create this first function that we're talking about. We'll type $RB. I'll push this font up a little bit. $RB. Now you notice $RB already came up in magenta. It's already recognized as our function name. This is called a function assignment statement. We're assigning to $RB a certain formula in this case. And if you remember our real body that we worked with in the other classes, close minus open. $RB equals close minus open, and then we can verify the function. In this case, that's all we need. And if you're curious about writing a function like this, why you would do it, when you get a minute, open up the function range, and the function range has one statement in it that says range equal high minus low. So it just lets us type the word range instead of the formula high minus low. Well, now, this function, a couple of things I want to show you. First of all, if we take a look in the dictionary, just to make my point, this is why we use the dollar signs at the beginning so we could find them. There's $RB. Now it's in the dictionary along with other functions you've written or imported or that we supplied from TradeStation. If there were any parameters, they would have appeared, and we'll get into the parameters and inputs in the next version. If we go to a chart, I have a chart open on this other workspace, so I'll just flip over to that. And let me disable momentum for the moment. We might want to look at that a little bit later. But for instance, in this chart, if we'd like to insert a show me, and we can use as a shell or a vehicle, we can use the custom show me prompt for format. I'm sorry, not a show me. This is a numeric moving a custom one line. I'm sorry about that. On the indicator list, we'll go to custom one line, and the input we'd like to put in for our criteria. Apologies. We'll insert the indicator custom one line. And now, instead of having a formula just written in the value, we'll actually call a function into this value cell. Now, if you remember what function you want to call, you can always just type it. You can type $RB. If you don't remember, you can use this button for the dictionary, and it'll bring up the dictionary just as we did directly from the Power Editor. There's $RB. And this, of course, will give us double type. That now we'll see our real body indicator, our real body oscillator, directly in the chart. By the way, we might have used custom 2 line and had the second line create a 0 line. Now, just in this case, what I did in order to expedite this a bit was to take our function and put it in the custom one line. And, of course, we could call that function into any of our EasyLanguage, whether it's using one of the custom tools for convenience or if we actually wrote our own indicator. Let's take this one more step. And I'm going to follow up with real body for a moment in a similar fashion to what we do in the boot camp class and in the home study class. So I'll create yet another new function. And this one we'll call $. We'll put the $sign at the front so we can find it again. RB average. $RB average. And we'll create a smooth RB. We'll create an average of the RB. Return type is numeric, so we'll leave that return type just as it is. And in this case, what we'll do is create one input. Actually, we'll put the input there in just a second. Let's write our assignment statement for the function. $RB average equals, we want to use the average function. So, of course, you can simply type it in, or you can go back to the dictionary, type average on the find tab. I'm just going to use a simple arithmetic average, so I'm going to find the function titled average. Stay with me one moment. Someone is having some trouble logging in. Let me just send a quick message. See if I can help somebody out in getting back in. Okay. We're going to call the average function price and length. Here's one of the points we wanted to make. We can call a function into our function. So the function is $RB average, and we're calling the average function into that. And of course, the price that we want to average is actually the function $RB. So we'll call that function in as well. We could have gone to the dictionary for it or just type it in. So we're calling two functions into this new function $RB average. We also have a length parameter. And we'll leave that length parameter, and that's what we'll declare as an input. So our input will be length. When we create a function, when we declare a parameter, we need to type that parameter. And I don't just mean type it on the keyboard. I mean we need to say what kind of a parameter it is. Chip, I see you're trying to type along. I'll give you all of these in a file. We'll attach a file to the archive once the archive gets posted. So I will slow down a bit if that'll help you. But don't worry so much about copying these. I'll put all these in an ELD file, and we'll post it with the archive at the beginning of next week. So the input length is going to be a numeric input. In other words, we need to supply a number. Here in the function, we don't give the input a default value as we will in an indicator. Instead, we give the input a default type. Again, in this case, numeric. So let me see if I have my function correct. Take out the extra line. Input length numeric. RB average equal average RB length. Now let's verify this. Now that we've verified it, I'm just going to park it up here. I'm going to park it up here, and let's write an indicator that uses that. So we'll click on New Indicator, and we can call this RB Average. I'll set this to none. Template. And here's what I'd like to get across. We'll just use a pre-declared numeric variable, value1 equal. And now I'd like to go to the dictionary again. And under the category user functions, we'll find two functions we created, $RB, $RB average. And click OK. Now the reason I did that is that I want you to see the progression. So we saw the function that's in the window just near the top of my desktop. $RB average equal average $RB length. So in the function $RB average, we're calling the average function, and we're also calling our $RB function. Now in the indicator where we want to plot $RB average, that's all we see is the function we're calling. We don't see the formulas. We don't see the formula for this function, nor the fact that it's calling additional functions. And when we paste it from the dictionary, it comes up with one parameter, length, which is exactly how we created it in the function $RB average. Semicolon for the end of the statement. Length, of course, we could replace with a fixed number, or we can declare it as an input. We'll make it a 10 by default. Here, of course, where we have length, we give it a default value. Now we're working on the indicator level. In the function, we give it a default type. In the indicator, we give it a default value. And the last thing we need, if we're going to see anything actually on the chart, plot 1. And I just use value1 pre-declared variable. To hold the value of $RB average. Okay, now that verified, I'm going to click over to my workspace 1 where we have the mini Dow chart running and insert the indicator we just created, which is RB average. There it is, RB average. Prompt for format. Just so we can point out the Inputs tab, length of 10. I'll leave that as it is. And there's our smooth version. We could have put in, when we do this in the class, most of you may recall, we put in a 0 line, a second plot statement as a 0 line, which probably would look very good. But I want to just stay focused on writing the functions. And that's really what we're here for, not so much the other niceties. So we've written a few numeric functions. We wrote RB average. We wrote $, we wrote RB, we wrote RB average, and then we wrote an indicator that called RB average. And I'd like to go a little further with something that maybe is a little bit longer, but maybe has a little bit more interest. So we'll create another new function. We'll do this, and then perhaps a text function. Actually, I have a very interesting text function after this one, and then I'll show you some of the true/false. All right, this one we'll call $VWA, $VWA, for volume weighted average. And we'll create a volume weighted average as a function, and then of course we can call that into our indicator. Double numeric is fine. This is another numeric function. And click OK. And what I want to do is I want to create something that's similar to a moving average, but weighted by volume. And although this formula is not very complex, it'll be a lot easier if we put it in a function, and that way each time we use it, we know we've created it so it'll work just right. Okay. I want to do a little bit of a cheat, if you will. I want to type something that will switch the words between volume and ticks depending on the type of chart. Now, those of you who've been through our boot camp class, the home study course, any of the classes, know that we spend some time talking about the word volume, ticks, up ticks, down ticks, open interest, and how they're to be used. We give you a grid on how the words are applied to different markets in different ways. Well, actually, our volume indicator, our default volume indicator, uses a little logic to determine which of these should be used. So if I highlight this, let me highlight it and pull it over, and I'll explain it a little more carefully. Okay. We won't need the plot statements. We're going to take those out. So let me tidy this up. Value 1 equals value 1 equals. Now, the reason I type that is the word, and I won't go into the detail now, but again, those of you who've been through the classes know that the word volume, the word ticks are interpreted differently on different charts under different circumstances. If you notice, with bar type greater than or equal to 2, in other words, it's a daily or greater, I want to use the word volume, and otherwise I want to use the word tick. First of all, doing this will be sure that I have the right information that I'm interested in. And keep in mind that we're writing the function, so if we can get this right here, then when we call the function, we know that the problem was already taken care of. Here's the calculation we're interested in. $sign VWA, volume weighted average. Remember, that's our name. It's coming up in magenta because that is the function. And here's our function assignment statement. We're going to use some other functions, and I'm just going to type these. These are all in the dictionary. We'll take value 1 times price over the last length bars. So this is the sum of volume or ticks, depending on the type of chart. Essentially the sum of volume times price over the last length bars divided by the sum of the volume over the last length bars. We're taking an average of the price and weighing it by the volume on each bar. Now we do have two inputs we want to dedicate in here. One of those inputs is price, which is of course numeric. Remember, we don't give it a value. It'll probably be the close by default when we create our indicator. But here in a function, we give it a type, price numeric, and length, which of course is also numeric. This little piece of logic that was put in here, and again, I plagiarized it right out of the volume indicator. I just took out the plot statements and turned them into variable assignment statements. That's designed to make sure we use the correct word when we switch charts, so we don't have to worry about doing it on the fly. That verifies. Now we have $DWA, volume weighted average. Let's do a quick and dirty indicator using that. New indicator, DWA. And here's what we'll do. We'll use a pre-declared numeric variable again, value 1 equals. Take our VWA function. Remember, I said if there are parameters, they would appear here. For our first one, RB, there were no parameters. And there it is. That's all we see. Summation functions are called into volume-weighted average, and here we have price and length. We could leave those. We could actually swap in fixed values for these, or we can declare them as input, which is, of course, what we would normally do. Input. Close. The reason that price input, I think, is important also is because you could have a volume-weighted average as a mid-price or typical price, i.e. pivot. You may not want a weighted average of the closing price. You may want to have a weighted average of some average value from the bar, and this input gives you that flexibility to change that value. And the length we'll pass in here is 20, so it's a 20-bar average. There's our variable assignment statement, and the last thing we use is a plot statement. Plot 1, value 1. I won't even bother to name the plot at the moment. That should verify. I'd like to toss this onto the chart. One thing I want to remember to do is check the properties. Scaling, because in this case we want this, as with any other moving average type of indicator, to overlay the price bars to change the scaling to the same axis as underlying data. Pretty standard fare that we learned in the first morning of the boot camp class. Now let's flip back to the chart. Maybe we want to do a little bit of cleaning up here. Let me remove RB and let me remove RB average. Let's insert two indicators, actually. Let's insert a conventional 20-bar moving average. So here's a moving average one line. And I will set this value to 20. And then let's insert the indicator we just wrote, which should be VWA. And that length is already coming up as 20. Obviously, I did that knowing the direction I want to go in with this. And then we'll also leave that as a moving average of the close. And that's the red line. So we do see some variation between the two averages, as we well should. One's a moving average weighted as to volume. You can do some examinations with this and see, does it hug the prices better? Does it give me truer signals or earlier signals? And that's actually something I'm curious about myself, and I might do a little research on that going forward. Okay. Let me go back to Workspace 2, just this is our blank slate where we're doing our EasyLanguage, and we can keep these around. I'll just minimize these. Okay. Let's take a look at writing a text function that we could find very, very useful. I think it's an interesting example at any rate. Let me clean up this chart for a moment. Let's actually toss some strategies in here just to generate some buys and sells on the chart. And I guess we can simple like Bollinger Bands, long entry and short entry. Doesn't really matter in particular. I will remove some of these other items from the chart so you can see some of the trades. What I want to do is write one very quick, you'll be amazed at how brief this is, one text function that will put on the chart, that will make appear on the chart our current position, long or short, the quantity in shares or contracts, and the current open position price. So it'll be a little bit of, it'll be a text function that will call into a strategy, and we'll see that information appear on the chart, and then it'll update real time. So new function, and this one we will call dollar position. Again, that dollar sign is just so we can find them in the list. It's a little less clumsy. Dollar position, and this one is not numeric. This one is string or text. It's going to return text. And as I said, I wanted to return 3 pieces of information. It'll be one long text string. And the pieces of information I wanted to return are what side of the market am I on, long or short, or flat, number of contracts or shares, and what was my entry price. What was my entry price? Okay. So we will declare one variable. And that variable will be side. And that variable is text, so we initialize it with a couple of quotation marks to make it a text character. That's a text variable. Now the variable side is going to have the word long, short, or flat in it. But the word market position, as most of you know, in EasyLanguage, returns long, short, or flat, but not in text. It returns long, short, or flat as a number. 0 being flat, 1 being long, -1 being short. So we need to take the value of market position. We need to take the value of market position, 0, 1, or -1, and convert it to text, long, short, flat. So we could do that with some if-then statements. I wrote something with a little switch in case. It doesn't really matter. If-then would be a little more traditional, and switch in case are relatively newer in EasyLanguage. If case equals 0 means if market position equals 0, side equals, now this is a string, so it's got to say flat in quotation marks. And in the case that market position equals 1, side equals long. And in the case that market position equals -1, side equals short. And it's a little more traditional programming kind of construct, relatively newer to EasyLanguage. I'm still a little more used to if-thens, and you could just write it as a series of if-thens as well. I just put it in this way so you see it's a little bit different. So the switch is market position, and each of the 3 cases is in the case that market position is 0, side equal flat, case market position is 1, side equal long, case market position -1, side is short. Now our assignment statement for our function $position. Now this entire piece has to be a string. That's the way we declared it. We said that this function is a text function. So the assignment statement has to assign a piece of text to $position. Well, side is a piece of text, so we can just write the word side. In other words, that'll plug in either the word flat, long, or short, depending on our switch and case statement. We do have in EasyLanguage something to push the words apart a little bit. It's the spaces command. I'll just use that to push the words apart. Plus sign is appending the different strings. Now I want to use the word current shares. The word current shares and the word current contracts are exactly the same thing. Doesn't matter which one we use. But current shares is a number. It returns a number. And I said everything that's assigned to $position has to be text. It's a text function. So we're going to use a reserved word, num2str, short for num to string. And we'll convert the current shares, and again, you could write current contracts, it doesn't matter. Either one will work on a futures chart or a chart of a stock or anything else. Current shares, 0. That's the number of decimal places that I want to convert into the string. And since the position is always a whole number of shares or contracts, I don't need any decimal places. Plus, put in a few more spaces. Plus, and I'm going to put in a line return just because I want you to be able to see what I'm writing. You could write it continuously. Plus, entry price. Entry price is a reserve word that obviously returns our entry price, but it's a number. So in order to get that into this string, we have to type num to string, num to str, entry price and then put in a number of decimals. Now here instead, I know that a current position is always 0 decimals. It's a whole number of shares of a contract. Not so with an entry price. It could be no decimals on our mini Dow chart. It could be 2 decimals on a stock. It could be more than 2 decimals on futures of Forex. So I'm going to have an input that lets me set the number of decimals I want displayed in this text object. I think that's about the last piece, is declaring the input. Declaring the input price decimal. And that is numeric. Remember, the function is text or string, but it can have numeric input. But the return for the function, what this actually returns, we said, was text or string. And I think that about lays out the point. Now, we're going to call this into a strategy, and I'll give you an idea of how you might want to look at this and why, as a separate piece, this might be useful. Okay, let's make sure it verifies first. Okay, I'll leave it up here, but we're going to call it into a little strategy snippet. We're not even going to write any buy and sell commands in this strategy. This is going to be a little strategy component that we can drop onto the chart along with whatever is actually doing the trading, and it'll return this information for us. Let's do it this way. New strategy. And I'm going to call this strategy, I will use a $sign here, current status, which is going to give me the current status of the position. Let's shut off any of the templates for the new strategy. Now remember, the function $position is going to give me a string, but I have to write some commands for using the string. And since we don't need this on every bar in the strategy, this is only a little updating tool that we need on the last bar. I don't want these text objects splashed all over the screen. I just want to know the current position. So I only want this to operate if I'm on the last bar on the chart. Last bar on the chart came up in magenta, so right away you know it's a function. And I'll tell you right now it's a true or false function. You can look it up, obviously, but it's a true or false function that returns true when we're on the last bar of the chart. So if we're on the last bar on the chart, and we have not created any object yet. If you've been through our classes, you know that when you work with text objects and trendline objects, you have to be a little careful about trying to manipulate an object that doesn't exist. When I finish building out this block, that may become more apparent. Value 1 equals, and we'll use the dictionary and find our command text new. All these commands were in the boot camp class, in the EasyLanguage home study course. We used all of these. Okay, text new. Now, it says date, time, price. I'm going to pass a 0 in there. And this is something that we didn't exactly do in those other classes. I'm going to bring in one other function that you might find useful. And this text object, what do I want this text object to have in it? Well, I want to have in it what's returned by my function $position. So here is where, for that string, I want to call my function $position. There's my function. Click OK. It has only one parameter, price decimal. Stay with me, and we'll do the housekeeping in a minute. Value 2 equals. Now notice I did not put in a location for text new. I put in these 3 zeros. So it's going to try and create a text object containing the results of my function, but it doesn't know where to put it. Well, we have a function called text float. We can use the find tab, or you can look under text drawing. I'm sorry, it's not a text drawing, it's a user function. I apologize. You can find text float. Probably should use the Find tab. And it'll keep a particular piece of text floating. In other words, it'll keep it a certain number of bars from the end of the chart and a certain percent of the way between the highest and lowest prices on the chart. That way you don't have to worry about it scrolling its way off the chart or getting lost. It'll stay in the same relative location, relative to the end of the chart and the prices. Very convenient. So we'll say we want to float text object value 1, and these two items will be input. Copy and paste them and put them up there right now, and we'll have to fix up the input declaration statement in just a moment. Semicolon, and else. Now we'll use the command, I will use the Find tab this time, text set string, and I'm going to set the string of value 1 to this same value. So whatever is returned by the function $position. Semicolon, and we need one more end to close the bigger block. Okay. Let's complete the housekeeping, and then I will walk through the paragraph with you in case it's not quite clear. We'll have a few inputs. One of those inputs is price decimals. And since I'm putting this on the mini Dow chart, I could make it a 0 because there are no decimal places to express in the mini Dow prices. If it was a stock chart, I'd make it a 2. Even the S&P, I'd make it a 2, just so it shows the decimals in the text object. Text bars back. In my notes, it looked good with 8. We'll see how that looks. So it'll automatically put the text 8 bars from the end of the chart, counting 8 bars back from the right. And I had a text price percent of 40. We may have to move that around, meaning it'll put it 40% of the way from the lowest price to the highest price on the chart. So, locational items. Okay. If we're on the last bar on the chart, then begin. So all of this happens only on the last bar because, as I said, we don't need or want to see anything before that last bar. If value 1 equals 0, that is, we have not created any object yet, so this is the first time we're putting it on the chart, then we create our new object. The new object contains our current position information, and it floats. If we have already created an object, else, all we do is update the string. All we do is update the string so it moves. It contains now our new updated position, whatever the value of that function is now that we've moved further along. Text float will always keep moving the object or keep it fixed in that relative location on the chart. Okay. There's one other thing I'd like to add in here. We know that a strategy may take a trade mid-bar. Even if we don't use intra-bar order generation, that is, even if we're not placing new trades mid-bar, we know that this strategy can execute mid-bar. But by default, the strategy is only going to update at the close of the bar. So what I would like is our text object to update real time. In other words, I'd like the text object to update intra-bar. So I'm going to set intra-bar order generation, this is called an attribute, equals true. I'm going to set intra-bar order generation to true for this. Now, it's not placing any orders. This is the whole strategy. There are no buy and sell commands. But this way, on every tick, it'll check the position and update it if there has been a trade during the course of the bar. Okay, we verify this. This has no buy and sell commands in it. This is strictly for the purpose of pulling position information and putting it onto the chart. I would not suggest putting this strategy, embedding it inside a bigger document, This is a little add-on tool that I think is useful when you're trying to track a strategy. In this strategy, we want to be able to use intra-bar order generation. Here's current status, format, calculation. You can see it's grayed out but locked in the on position because that's what I set with that attribute intra-bar order generation equal true. The reason I like this as a separate piece is I don't necessarily want to run this all the time on every chart. It might be handy sometimes. And I want to use it with intra-bar order generation, but I don't necessarily want intra-bar order generation for the other components. So it's a module, it's a component that I can snap in and then pull out if I don't want to use it or shut it off. And here's what it looks like. 40% was not the best place to put this. Let me reformat that to this chart. Let's change this to, we could actually have been a little more dynamic with that. Let's change this to 75. Okay. Short one at 12,301. And that's from this trade right here. You'll see short one, 12,301. That's the current open position. We could have included more things in there, like a P&L calculation. That would update on every tick. But at least now we get a picture of what our current open position is. And as that position changes, in fact, I'll change this to a 1-minute bar chart. So maybe we'll get something a little different. Long one at 12,333. That's this trade right here. Long one, 12,333. And if the position happened to change, of course, we'd see that change even intra-bar because we turned on intra-bar order generation for that one piece. Okay. I know there are some questions that have gone up, and I will try and come to some of those. When I seem to be stuttering on my words, there were a few people who are having trouble with audio and video, and I did try and type a quick email without losing the rest of you, sort of help them out a little bit. The last few pieces I'd like to show you, I won't type, but I'll include them in the material, and I just want to show them to you. And those are two functions that are actually true-false. Let me open those up. Indicators. One is called bull kiss, and one is called bear kiss. Okay. We were all familiar, all of us who use EasyLanguage are, of course, familiar with greater than, less than, and crosses over and crosses under. But sometimes in looking at a couple of values, what we want to do is we want to identify something called a bull kiss or a bear kiss. And that's when two values come together and then diverge again in the same direction. In other words, it might be easier to describe a bull kiss. Here with an oscillator type of indicator, and without breaking down the exact numbers, generally this would be a bear kiss. Bearish, comes up to 0, and then bearish again. So this little picture is a bear kiss. Not a crossover and not a greater than or less than. So it's a multiple bar comparison that X was on a bull kiss, X is greater than Y, then X equals Y, then the next time it's greater than Y again. And the bear kiss is the opposite, X is less than Y, X equals Y, then X becomes less than Y again. So this might be another bear kiss. Offhand, I'm looking for a bull kiss, but I don't see it. We can try and use the functions if we want to look a little more closely. But we wrote a function, and it's a true-false function that identifies that, and what it does is it takes a look and sees what's the relationship of X and Y. Now, X and Y are two different data sets, first data, second data. So it could be, first data could be momentum, second data could be 0, as we looked at in that last chart. or it could be two different oscillators. Or one could be the MACD histogram and 0. Bear kiss is set to false, so it starts off the right way on each bar. And then it looks at the relationship currently of first and second data. Then it looks at the relationship of first and second data the bar before. And then if it has to, it loops through to find out the last time they were different. So remember, a bearish kiss, first is less than second, then first is equal to second, then first is less than second again on a series of bars. So if first is less than second now, and it was equal to second on a bar before, we have to go through and find out the last time they weren't equal. If the last time they were not equal, first was less than, then we have a kiss. If the last time they weren't equal, first was greater than, then you actually have a crossover. So this is the bear kiss logic. The other one, bull kiss, is the same idea, but looking for two values that come down and back. I will take a minute here and see if we can see this on the chart. I know we had some bear kisses. So what we can insert is a show me, and we can use the custom show me that I was fudging with before. And here in the input tab, we can go to the dictionary, and again, we can use bear kiss and bull kiss, but I know, at least by eyeing it, I think we certainly have some bear kisses on here. Now the bear kiss first data, the oscillator that you see in the chart is momentum, close, 12 bar momentum of the close. And the second data, the horizontal green line that we're looking for the kiss against, is a 0 line. So really data 2 is just a flat 0 line. Bear kiss, momentum, close 12, and a 0 line. And it'll put a dot on the close of the bar if it finds one of those kisses. So now let's see if I was right and we actually have one. There it is. So this was a bear kiss right on this bar because the oscillator momentum was less than 0, equals 0, less than 0 again. Bear kiss. And we scroll back. I think we had another one that we sort of eyeballed. So you might see whether there's another one, and that is the one that we eyeballed. Less than 0, equals 0, less than 0 again. Bear kiss. I think that makes a couple of points, and probably the concluding point that it makes is that writing this, I had to think out a little bit of the logic. It's not very difficult, EasyLanguage. But once it's done, and I can pass any other two values in there, and I can use this bear kiss in a show me. I can use it in a strategy. I know some people who used to trade on certain momentum oscillators, multiple momentum oscillators, and they would look for things like bull kisses and bear kisses between the two oscillators. So now I can just pass those values in, and I've got the little logical machinery in here that will make the evaluations and let me know when I get a bull kiss or a bear kiss. Remember, these are the functions. Take the function and put it in a show me. Take the function and use it in a strategy. If you put it in a show me, you can write an alert. You don't write the alert here. We'll write the alert in the show me. Now, let me take a look quickly at the list of questions. I know some people had to log off and ask the question. I'll just follow this up with emails. There was a question on doing a dollar-weighted put-call volume ratio. We could certainly do it volume-weighted. I don't think it's really a function question necessarily, Scott, but what I'll do is I'll see what I can think up, and maybe I can send you something or point you some links that would relate to that. Don asked about strategies that trade on multiple time frames. That's certainly possible. Again, not really a function question, but you can certainly have multi-data, and those data streams can be multiple time frames. Also, Don, you can certainly combine existing strategies into one. That's actually the more proficient use of EasyLanguage in many ways. to actually combine them and not just a this or this, but actually have some nuanced combination between different pieces. All right, last thing I want to point out, for those of you who found this useful, and I hope you did, obviously it was designed for people who've already done some tinkering around, at least some tinkering around with EasyLanguage, if not more than that. There is an online seminar, and another one. If you click Help TradeStation Training Online Seminars, Help TradeStation Training Online Seminars, and then when you get to the seminar page, it won't be this page, but on the left side, click on Archive, and then go to the EasyLanguage tab. If you scroll down a bit, there's an online seminar called Using EasyLanguage Multiple Output Functions. In this discussion, we stayed on writing your own single output function. So this one that's already archived, that's been up there a bit, actually is, feel free to watch it, but it's sort of the next step. From single output functions is go to multiple output functions. For instance, what if I had RB and RB average in one function? And I think actually that's one of the examples I used in that online seminar using EasyLanguage multiple output functions. Anything that was not supplied in TradeStation, I will post into an ELD file that'll go up with the archive. As I said, that archive probably won't get posted till next week. We try and do them quicker, but I know we have some, it probably won't get posted before Monday or Tuesday at the earliest next week. But I will provide an ELD. It'll have bull kits, bear kits, and the other pieces that we typed out and worked with here today. DJ, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate that. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for another try at our market internals. In July, we'll be talking about news, and then we'll be hosting more. Keep an eye on the schedule.